I am in California first and foremost because I was asked by my 17-year-old daughter to bring her out here and show her your fabulous schools. We actually toured Cal State this morning, and we're on another campus yesterday, and I've got a son at Purdue University, but you come out here to California for, I know, all the public challenges that you have in California. I am mindful of what Ronald Reagan said of California, that if Christopher Columbus had landed on the West Coast, we'd have never discovered Maine. Makes the cornfields a little hard to compete with when you're looking at the vistas, but it's a joy to be with you today, and thank you. And if you want to welcome my 17-year-old daughter here, that would probably embarrass her terribly. My daughter Charlotte is with us. I want to say it is particularly gratifying for me to share the podium. Brian is someone that I've admired for some time as a great champion in various roles, either at the Claremont Institute, now at the OC Register. We appreciate your voice, Brian. And Sally Pipes, thank you. Thank you for the success of your book, The Truth About Obamacare. Thank you for being what Human Events called one of the top 10 conservative women in the United States of America in the past year, and thank you for making sure that the American people understand the real cost of this government takeover of health care. You've made an enormous difference in this debate, Sally, and I'm personally proud to meet you. It's also great for me to see my friend Chris Cox. I was for Chris Cox before it was cool. I arrived in Congress in the year 2000, around the time that Chris's career had taken him into leadership, and I can tell you that having just done a round at the leadership table in the last Congress, more times than I can recount, I'll say this to him publicly, I modeled our efforts to move our leadership in a conservative direction based on the deft touch and principled stance that Chris Cox took in the leadership in the Congress, and then going forward and having such a storied career in the administration and in private life. Chris, great to see you. I know the best is yet to come for Chris Cox and your family, so it's an honor to be with you. I'm very excited to have an opportunity to share a few things. Pacific Research Institute is one of those organizations that's really about ideas, and I know that the caliber of the men and women in this room suggests that the better part of this program would be in the Q&A session. And so I want to share with you a few thoughts about what is happening along the fault lines of limited government and free market economics. But I also very quickly want to get to your questions. I learned a while back I'm a little bit better at dialogue than at monologue. I spent most of the 1990s as a call-in talk radio show host in Indiana, and my wife Karen would periodically listen to the show, and just periodically. And I would sometimes say to her, well, what'd you think of the show? And you know, the talk show I did pretty much was like most talk shows. You start with about a 15-minute monologue, and then you start taking calls. Or if you're Rush Limbaugh, you start with a 2.5-hour monologue, and then start to take Dennis Prager, the 3-hour monologue. But and I love those people and admire them greatly. But for me, I do about 15 minutes. And then take calls. And my wife, whenever I'd ask her how the show went, she'd often say, "Well, I got really good after you start taking calls." So, so let me anticipate the same reaction here. My wife is very much on my mind this weekend. Charlotte, my ears are still ringing because Karen is a graduate of a little better-known school these days, Butler University in Indianapolis. My kids, it was after they made it to the finals last year, my kids said, "Dad, when you called Mama Bulldog, we didn't know that was an alumni reference." So we're actually very excited in Indiana to see basketball returning and to see the Bulldogs making it back to the Final Four. It's a wonderful and exciting time in the Hoosier State because Indiana really is basketball. The movie was not an exaggeration. If you see the movie, most of which was shot in my little congressional district, and the tenacity, the tradition, and the strong opinions all reflected in that film are very true to this day. So, it's great to be with you today. It seems to me that as we look at where the nation is today, or where 20% of the nation is here in California, all of us are asking ourselves two questions. How do we restore fiscal responsibility to governance in this nation at every level? And secondly, how do we encourage economic growth? And I want to speak to both of those issues because they're very much in the forefront of what's happening on Capitol Hill, and very much in the forefront of battles that are taking place as we speak. You know, when I was with a couple of basketball coaches in Indianapolis on Friday, and a lot of people say, well, do you want to work on fiscal discipline and spending cuts, or do you want to work on growth? And from my standpoint, they're both two sides of the same coin. I mean, to change the fiscal direction of our national government, to rekindle the belief that we can have a government that lives within our means, will be precisely the foundation upon which we can then begin to pursue policies that will encourage a recovery far beyond California and all across this country. Everything begins with discipline. And then one of these coaches said to me, he said, well, Mike, that's how it is with basketball teams. When you get the fresh recruits in, the first thing you do is you get them out, and it's up and downs on the court, and it's basketball drills. Everything begins with discipline, and what's true of individuals is also true of nations and their governments. And so everything begins with discipline. And the battle that's taking place on Capitol Hill today is all about that battle. Republicans, when we were campaigning for the right to lead the Congress again, Republicans last year made several promises in our so-called Pledge to America. We pledged to repeal Obamacare, lock, stock, and barrel, and to defund the income tax. We have voted to do that. Another thing that we pledged to do was to find $100 billion in savings in this year off of the President's proposed budget. Now, you know, a lot of bright people in the room. I'm not parsing words. The reason why that number is now $61 billion is because that's what it would take to reduce spending off what the President wanted to spend. Because the Democrats obviously didn't do their appropriations work, and we don't actually have an operating expenditure budget for the year. So Republicans dug in. We fought for $61 billion in budget cuts. We sent it to the United States Senate, and it was promptly and summarily rejected. Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, actually took to the floor remarkably and said that in a time when we have a $14 trillion national debt, in a year where we have a $1.65 trillion deficit, that $61 billion in savings between now and the end of this fiscal year was, his words were, mean-spirited, reckless, irresponsible. And he even went to the floor to make a passionate defense of federal funding for the Cowboy Poetry Institute, which interestingly, apparently is in Nevada. So, I don't know anything against cowboys, being out west now, I don't know anything against poetry. But you know, if there ever was a time when we might look for cowboy poets to live on their own means, it might be now.